50 surveillance planes. But Russia hasn't confirmed the extent of damage.
I can say with certainty that this is an absolutely unique operation. What's most interesting, and this can now be stated publicly, is that the office of our operation on Russian territory was located directly next to FSB headquarters in one of their regions. In total, 117 drones were used in the operation, with a corresponding number of drone operators involved.
Ukraine delivered a massive blow to Russia under Operation Spiderweb. The operation not only left Russia shaken, but also informed the world that the landscape of modern warfare had completely changed. The clandestine attack had been 18 months in planning. Ukraine smuggled its explosive-laden drones into remote areas and unleashed them out of trucks. The deadly drone assault on the eve of Istanbul peace talks has raised concerns over Russia's retaliation. US says Zelensky carried out the attacks without notifying the White House. Trump's former advisor calls it a warning sign and a geopolitical insult to President Donald Trump, who has been trying to bring the war to an end. Despite Trump's attempts to disown it, the war has very much become Trump's war, on which US credibility now hangs by a thread. Ukraine's European allies are of the view that Russia's threat can't be ignored in the aftermath of the attack.
I very much hope not. And in order to make sure that that isn't the case, we need to prepare. But we cannot ignore the threat that Russia poses. We've seen what's happened in Ukraine just over 3 years ago. Those tanks rolled across a border, something I think all of us thought we wouldn't really see in our lifetimes, the invasion of a European country.
The dangerous attack has led to the million-dollar question: will Putin take a nuclear recourse? Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
The White House says US President Donald Trump is open to meeting his Russian and Ukrainian counterparts in Turkey.
This after the two sides failed on Monday to make headway towards an elusive ceasefire.
Turkey President Erdogan had proposed that Russian President Vladimir Putin, Ukrainian President Zelensky and US President Trump come for a third round later this month itself, either in Istanbul or Ankara. Putin has thus far refused such a meeting, but Zelensky says he is willing, underlining that key issues can only be resolved at leaders-level talks. Zelensky says he expects Trump to take strong steps and has urged the US president to toughen sanctions on Russia to push it to agree to a full ceasefire.
In Monday's meeting, Ukraine said that Russia rejected its call for an unconditional ceasefire. Russia said it offered instead a partial truce of 2 to 3 days in some areas of the front line. Ukraine said it would study a document that Russian side handed its negotiators, outlining its demand for both peace and a full ceasefire.
But there has been no communication from them regarding their document until today. Only during the discussion today, Russians handed over its document to our delegation. Our teams will take a week to review the documents, and then we can coordinate further steps.
According to its negotiating terms reported by Russian state media, Moscow will only agree to a full ceasefire if Ukrainian troops pull back entirely from the 4 regions Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia and Kherson. Moscow has also demanded a ban on Kiev joining NATO, limiting Ukraine's military and ending Western military support.
However, top negotiators from both sides confirmed their latest talks yielded a deal to swap all severely wounded soldiers, as well as all captured fighters under the age of 25. Russia's lead negotiator, Vladimir Medinsky, said it would involve at least 1,000 on each side, topping the 1,000 prisoners of war exchange agreed at talks last month. The two sides also agreed to hand over the bodies of 6,000 killed soldiers.
We agreed on the largest scale prisoner exchange according to the following formula. Firstly, all severely wounded and seriously ill will be exchanged under the formula all for all. Under the same all for all formula, young soldiers under the age of 25 will be exchanged.
Now, the meeting comes less than a day after Ukraine carried out an unprecedented drone attack on Russia, Operation Spiderwebs. The Russian Defense Ministry confirmed that the Ukrainian drone strikes targeted strategic nuclear bombers at 5 air bases across Russia.
Strategic nuclear bombers were targeted in Belaya Air Base in Siberia, Ivanovo Air Base northeast of Moscow. The Dyagi-Livo base that is located south of Moscow also came under attack. A huge explosion then also rocked the Russian Arctic city of Severomorsk, which is home to Russia's largest fleet of nuclear submarines. Ukraine also hit the Olynya Guba naval base in Murmansk region.
Ukraine claimed the attacks destroyed around 40 Russian military planes, including nuclear-capable Tu-95 and Tu-22 strategic bombers. Moscow also targeted Ukraine with its largest drone strike yet, launching more than 470 drones and 7 missiles overnight.
European nations are not just supplying offensive weapons to Ukraine, they've also removed any restrictions on use case scenarios. That means Ukraine can strike Russia where it wants and when it wants. Escalation of war in Ukraine poses a threat of expansion of war in Europe, especially those countries that share a border with Russia, who are feeling the heat now. The European arms race has begun. Russia is amping up its defense capabilities to historically high levels. Meanwhile, NATO countries are also increasing their defense spending. The most recent warning came from Germany. German defense chief has warned that Russia might attack NATO in the next 4 years. Citing record production of military equipment by Russia, he said an attack on the Baltic state members could happen as soon as 2029. Latvia's intelligence service has also warned of a deteriorating security situation in Eastern Europe. Latvian intelligence has pointed out at major Russian military buildup in the Baltic Sea. They also say Russia is expanding surveillance activities around NATO military operations in the region. Nordic nations are also ringing the alarm bells. They are preparing their people to defend against military and non-military threats. In May this year, the Norwegian government published its first national security strategy, highlighting the country's most serious security challenge since World War II. In January, Norway started building bomb shelters, resuming a practice that it had halted in 1998. The front line in Ukraine heats up. European countries are mulling over the possibility of what might be Russia's end game, that is expansion of war into the NATO territory.
Now, the fallout of Ukraine's audacious drone attack raises a critical question. Why did Russia fail to detect Ukraine's biggest attack on its soil? Despite billions spent on layered defenses, dozens of Ukrainian drones made their way. Now, our next report decodes how Ukraine's cheap drones evaded Russia's costly air defenses. Take a look.
It was a stunning and audacious attack. The widespread impact is only becoming clear. Ukraine smuggled 117 aerial drones on the backs of trucks to carry the largest drone attack on Russian soil, which has stunned President Putin. For decades, Russia has boasted one of the world's most advanced and layered air defense systems. From the long-range S-400 designed to intercept enemy aircraft and ballistic missiles hundreds of kilometers away, to the shorter-range Pantsir systems, meant to shoot down drones, cruise missiles and low-flying threats. But Ukraine's drone attack has exposed how small, slow, cheap drones can slip through the cracks. Russia's defense systems are optimized for large, fast-moving targets. The drones this time were reportedly launched not from across the border or via aerial routes, but from within Russia itself. With a significantly shorter distance to cover, the drones reached their targets within seconds or minutes, giving Russian forces little time to react. The drones flew at extremely low altitudes, beneath the radar detection range of long-range systems like the S-400. Experts are calling the assault a Russian intelligence failure. Ukraine says it had been planning the Operation Spiderweb
for 18 months, yet Russian agencies fail to detect threat. This is not the first instance of Ukrainian drones breaching Russian defenses. Between August 2023 and 2024, Ukraine managed to destroy multiple S-400 systems, including their radar batteries. The deepest drone strike now is a huge blow to Putin's pride at a time when Putin was gaining the upper hand in the battlefield.
Nuclear bombers parked in the open, where, under proper transparency, all of this would have to change in the age of this drone warfare, and they would have to have more secrets around this nuclear deterrent, given that this is no longer sacred. There was a time when the United States and the Russians would never even think about attacking each other's nuclear deterrent. But again, this time has now seemingly come to an end. So this is, again, I don't think the world would necessarily be the same after this.
Experts have raised doubts over how the fierce drone attack will help Ukraine in the long term.
And this will not play well for the Ukraine side. If anything, this is going to drive Russia into harder position. And on the battlefield, the Ukraine side is losing. So I'm not sure how this is going to help them long term.
Given the scale of the attack, Russian President Putin is sure to not let it go unpunished. It remains to be seen just when and how Putin will avenge the June 1st attack. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Shifting our focus to the Russia-Ukraine war now, the White House says U.S. President Donald Trump is open to meeting his Russian and Ukrainian counterparts in Turkey. And this comes after the two sides failed on Monday to make headway towards an elusive ceasefire. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has proposed that Russian President Vladimir Putin, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, and Trump come for a third round later this month, either in Istanbul or Ankara. Now, Putin has thus far refused such a meeting, but Zelensky says he is willing, underlining that key issues can only be resolved at leaders-level talks. Zelensky says he expects Trump to take strong steps and has urged the U.S. president to toughen sanctions on Russia to push it to agree to a full ceasefire. In Monday's meeting, Ukraine said that Russia rejected its call for an unconditional ceasefire. Russia said it offered instead a partial truce of 2 to 3 days in some areas of the front line. Ukraine said that it would study a document that Russian side handed its negotiators outlining its demand for both peace and a full ceasefire.
But there has been no communication from them regarding their document until today. Only during the discussion today, Russians handed over its document to our delegation. Our teams will take a week to review the documents, and then we can coordinate further steps.
According to its negotiating terms, reported on by Russian state media, Moscow will only agree to a full ceasefire if Ukrainian troops pull back entirely from 4 regions: Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. Moscow has also demanded a ban on Kiev joining NATO, limiting Ukraine's military and ending Western military support. Hahowever, top negotiators from both the sides confirmed their latest talks yielded a deal to swap all severely wounded soldiers as well as all captured fighters under the age of 25. Russia's lead negotiator, Vladimir Medinsky, said it would involve at least 1,000 on each side, topping the 1,000 for 1,000 prisoners of war exchange agreed at talks last month. The two sides also agreed to hand over the bodies of 6,000 killed soldiers.
We agreed on the largest scale prisoner exchange according to the following formula. Firstly, all severely wounded and seriously ill will be exchanged under the formula all for all. Under the same all for all formula, young soldiers under the age of 25 will be exchanged.
The meeting comes less than a day after Ukraine carried out an unprecedented drone attack on Russia. The Russian Defense Ministry confirmed that the Ukrainian drone strikes targeted strategic nuclear bombers at 5 air bases across the country. Strategic nuclear bombers were targeted in Belaya Air Base in Siberia, Ivanovo Air Base that is northeast of Moscow, and Diaghilevo Base that is located south of Moscow. A huge explosion also rocked the Russian Arctic city of Severomorsk, which is home to Russia's largest fleet of nuclear submarines. Ukraine also hit Olenia Guba naval base in Murmansk region. Now, Ukraine claimed the attacks destroyed around 40 Russian military planes, including nuclear-capable Tu-95 and Tu-22 strategic bombers. Now, Moscow also targeted Ukraine with its largest drone strike yet, launching more than 470 drones and 7 missiles overnight. Ukraine claims it destroyed Russian bombers worth billions of dollars in a large-scale drone assault on enemy soil as it geared up for talks with Moscow counterparts to explore prospects for a ceasefire.
President Zelensky claimed that Ukraine's Operation Spider Web destroyed Russian bombers worth at least $7 billion in its most long-range operation of the war yet. Kiev claims that the deep strikes inside Russian territory named Operation Spider Web was planned for over a year. According to Ukraine's security service, SBU, the operation itself was personally overseen by President Zelensky and executed by SBU chief Vasyl Malyuk using FPV drones.
According to reports quoting a Ukraine security official, the drones were hidden under the roofs of small wooden houses. These mobile homes were then transported to trucks. On trucks, once in place, the roofs were opened remotely, releasing a swarm of drones that struck the airfields simultaneously.
An eyewitness video showed drones flying out of a truck parked near Russia's Belaya Air Base. Ukraine targeted strategic nuclear bombers in Belaya Air Base in Siberia, Ivanovo Air Base northeast of Moscow, and Diaghilevo Base that is located south of Moscow, which also came under attack. A huge explosion also rocked the Russian Arctic city of Severomorsk, which is home to Russia's largest fleet of nuclear submarines. Ukraine also hit Olenia Guba naval base in Murmansk region.
In its strikes, Ukraine claims to have struck Russia's strategic bomber fleet, A-50 early warning planes, Tu-95 strategic bombers, and Tu-22 M3 long-range attack aircraft. According to Ukraine, Russia's multiple nuclear bombers were rendered useless, and 41 aircraft were damaged or destroyed, reports say, at the Olenia airfield near the Arctic Circle. Drones were launched directly from a truck parked at a gas station.
Russia's defense ministry confirmed on Telegram that several of its military aircraft caught fire, adding that there were no casualties and that several participants had been arrested. In response, the Russian side claimed a strike on a training ground in Ukraine. In a rare admission of its military losses, the Ukrainian army said that the strike had killed a dozen soldiers. The attack led Ukrainian ground forces commander Mikhailo Drapati to announce his resignation.
Earlier, Russia had claimed that a blast brought down a road bridge in the Bryansk region bordering Ukraine on Saturday, derailing a passenger train heading to Moscow and killing 7 people. A separate rail bridge in the neighboring Kursk region was blown up hours later in the early hours of Sunday, derailing a freight train and injuring the driver. Authorities did not say who was behind the explosions, but investigators said a criminal inquiry was underway.
Both attacks took place in the Russian territory of Kursk and Bryansk. Kursk is a region where the Ukrainian forces had penetrated through Russian borders last August in 2024. Bryansk borders the Sumy region of Ukraine.
Now, the recent escalation came at a delicate moment. 3 years into the war, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Sunday that he was sending a delegation to Istanbul led by his defense minister, Rustem Umerov, for talks on Monday with Russian officials. Turkey is hosting the meeting, which was spurred by U.S. President Donald Trump's push for a quick deal to end the 3-year war.
The Russian delegation led by presidential aide Vladimir Medinsky arrived in Istanbul on Sunday evening to take part in talks face-to-face with the Ukrainian side.
And to discuss more, we're now being joined by Lieutenant Colonel Daniel L. Davis. He is a military expert and host of Daniel Davis Deep Dive on YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure to have you.
Always a pleasure to be here.
All right, let's begin with these attacks. Now, as reports say, they were prepared for more than a year. Of course, it was expansive. Drones were smuggled, and the attack was carried out under President Zelensky's operation. Now, these attacks were so meticulously planned. How do you assess Ukraine, of course, and Russia's capabilities in these attacks, and how does this change the face of the war at this juncture?
Well, first of all, let's just look at the skill that went into conducting these operations. It used a great deal of what's called operational security to keep it silent. I'm sure that they probably had very limited exposure even among the allies, whether that's Great Britain, France, Germany, the United States, even allegedly that we weren't even involved with any of this or didn't even have any knowledge of it beforehand. So that by itself is a real feat. And then the technology that went into having this done with the satellite remotes, with the remote opening of the trucks themselves, the getting them to where they need to go, absolutely a picture perfect strategic operation on the Ukraine side. That being said, what matters in a war is not individual acts, but how things contribute toward either winning or losing a war. And this is going to have probably no impact at all on the conduct of the war, even depending on how many bombers were actually hit. There's disputes about whether it was 40 or maybe even 9. It's unclear what's accurate, but it was a significant number. The problem is, for Ukraine, Russia has a lot more of them. And the number that they use in any given sortie or attack mission into Ukraine is probably around a dozen, maybe less than that. So there's plenty to replace those, so that won't affect at all the Russian fire that's coming into the Ukraine side. Worse, probably, this all comes the day before the peace talks are supposed to start in Istanbul tomorrow, and this will not play well for the Ukraine side. If anything, this is going to drive Russia into harder position. And on the battlefield, the Ukraine side is losing. So I'm not sure how this is going to help them long term.
Lieutenant Colonel, you've answered one of the big queries that I had. It was tactical brilliance that the entire world saw in terms of those visuals, but how strategically wise was it? That's something you've addressed in your response. Going into the talks into Istanbul, do you feel that Ukraine is taking the right approach to bring Russia to the negotiating table at this point? Because if history tells us anything, this will only hamper any kind of peace talks which were perhaps on the horizon in Istanbul.
The bottom line to any kind of negotiation, who has the leverage, who has the power to compel the other side to concede to their issues? And there's no question that all of the cards are on the Russian side. When you're talking about air power, air defense, manpower, technological, industrial capacity, etc., all off the charts on the Russian side. The only area where there is parity is in the drone fight right now. And I've talked to people on both sides of the line of contact.